This week, we will be learning about value. Value is a key compositional tool in art. You can use it for many different things, such as to set the mood of your art piece, to kind of show what time of the day it is, or to give it a lot more interest to make people stop and stare at it. Value is the relative lightness or darkness of a color. A lot of times people think that value in art has to do with how much a piece of art is worth. Okay, so some people think maybe it's priceless or maybe it's, several $1,000,000. But really, when we talk about value in art, especially in an art class, we're talking about how light or dark a color is. Now, value can be neutral or achromatic. Chroma means color and achroma means no color. So value can be either light red, medium red, dark red, or it can be various grays. Okay, so we will be working in the grayscale because it's easier whenever you're first learning about value and how to apply it to your art. Okay, so on a grayscale, value scale, the brightest white is the first value, and then it goes into those middle intermediary grays to the darkest black. We have two different types of value scales. There's a step scale and a gradation scale. A step scale looks like this right here. The step scale has a specific square for each value. Okay, so notice how number 2 is the same value for the whole entire square. A gradation is kind of like an ombre effect where it softly changes or transitions from one value to another. Okay, so if you were to look at this lemon right here and you were to think about it in a grayscale form, kind of like if you printed it on a printer that only has black and white ink, what type of values do you think would make up this lemon? If you said 1, 2, 3, or 4 might make up the values of this lemon, you would be correct. These are lighter values, and if you look at the lemon, there are various spots of light and medium gray or medium value in the lemon itself. Now, if you look at this purple eggplant over here, what values do you think are present in this picture if it were in grayscale? Chances are you would say 7, 8, and 9, maybe even 6. Okay, so 6, 7, 8, and 9 for this eggplant right here. Okay, something else that's interesting to know is that if you were looking at number 1 and number 9, if you were to put the black and white right next to each other, that's considered high contrast. Contrast means the difference between two things. So high contrast means a huge difference between two values. So for example, 1 and 9, or even 2 and 9 would be a big contrast, a high contrast. Low contrast, on the other hand, are values that are right next to each other on the value scale. Okay, so for example, 2, 3, and 4 would be considered a low contrast grouping of values. Okay, same thing if I said 4, 5, and 6. Those would be considered low contrast. Same thing with 7, 8, and 9. Those are low contrast because they aren't very different from each other. The range of value is important when you're thinking of art because it helps set the tone. Just like writers in literature choose what words to help set the tone or the mood of their stories, you can do the same thing as an artist by using the different values. Okay, sometimes you can make things feel happy, you can make them feel intense or aggressive. Sometimes you might want to make them feel kind of melancholy, and you can do all of that with the different values. Okay, high contrast, which we talked about earlier, that would be like a black and white scenario, creates more aggressive feelings, whereas lower contrast creates a more relaxed feeling. Okay, so if you wanted a relaxing picture for your bedroom, you would choose something that has a low contrast. Okay, high contrast is also very visible. That's the reason that speed limit signs on the highway are black and white, because they're easier to see. The brain automatically goes to areas of high contrast. That's also why referee shirts have black and white stripes on them. It's much easier to find the referee amongst all of the other players in the field in all of the different, how everybody is moving around, it's easier to find the referee because of the black and white shirt. On this picture by William Bailey, I want you to think about what type of contrast you see here. Do you think it's high contrast or low contrast? If you said low contrast, you would be correct. This is low contrast because it only uses a few values that are very close to each other on the value scale. It looks like it's nicely done. Everything in here looks pretty realistic, but because it has such a low contrast, it's not necessarily very interesting. People tend to find things that have more contrast to be more interesting, more visually interesting. Okay, what about this picture by William Bailey? Do you think this is high contrast or low contrast? Again, if you said low contrast, you would be correct. These values are all near each other on the color, or not the color wheel, sorry, they are all near each other on the value scale. Okay, these are probably 7, 8, 9 on the value scale. So this is also considered low contrast, even though it's darker in color. Okay, let's look at this picture here. I want you to take a second and think about where your eyes go first. If you said right here, this white spot on her chest, chances are it's because there is such a high contrast. This is the brightest part of the whole picture. And this area right here is very dark, right next to that bright white. So your eyes might have gone here first. After that, the artist might have directed your eyes either to the face of this woman here or to her hands down here because they also have a little bit of contrast to them. It is human nature to look at the areas of highest contrast first. It's automatic, your eyes just kind of do it. Okay, looking here at these 4 cubes, you'll notice that they're all basically the same thing, except they have different values going on. Now, the interesting thing about this is even though it's basically the same picture, but with different values, you can kind of see different moods and also different times of day. For example, when I look at this one right up here in the upper left corner, I notice that it kind of reminds me of early morning when it's very, very bright outside, almost like rudely bright. Okay, and that's what I think of when I see this one right here. These other 2, the second one and this third one down here, kind of remind me of midday a little bit. They seem to be a little bit more relaxed and not as harsh as this first bright one right up here. Okay, last but not least, this one down here kind of makes me think of the evening, and it seems to be, I don't know, I would say that it seems to be a little bit more quiet or desolate feeling to me. Okay, so that's how value can affect the mood in your art. Okay, looking at this picture, I want you to take a second and think about where your eyes go to first. Chances are your eyes might have gone to this center section right here. There are a couple of reasons why. One, it's pretty light right here, and there's some darker areas around it, so we have some decent contrast, but also we have such a thing as leading lines. That means that our eyes follow this line here, and then it follows this line here to this point in the center of the picture. Some other people find that they look at this part right here because there is a little bit higher contrast than there is in the middle. And some people say that they just notice the sky first, maybe because the whole thing is so bright. Okay, on this picture, this is our last picture, I want you guys to think about where your eyes go to first on this one. Okay, now the cool thing about being an artist and playing around with value is that you can control the viewer. Okay, we talked about how value can help shape the mood or tone of a piece, but you can also direct the person's eye line throughout the piece of art, which is really great because chances are if you're painting a picture, you want people to look at the whole thing and appreciate the whole entire paper instead of just noticing one part and moving on. Okay, so whenever I look here, I notice her face first. Okay, she has a pretty decent contrast going on her face. There's another reason too. If you notice, her face is right in the middle of this painting. Okay, not only that, but humans tend to seek out faces everywhere. Okay, humans will always seek out a face. That's why people find pictures in their toast, or they might say their toast looks like Dolly Parton. It's because they're finding a face in there, even though there's not really one. Okay, our brain always seeks out faces. So starting with her face here, I tend to follow the lightest areas whenever my eyes move through this painting. I look here, I travel down here to this child right here. She's got a little toddler. Okay, and then my eyes kind of swing over this way to this little baby who's been highlighted by the sunlight. Okay, from there, I usually kind of swing back this way over to this fire right over here. Okay, my eyes also tend to travel up here to the mantle. They tend to hit the top of that hat right there and then swing right over to the brightness of the window. Now, if you went in a different order, if you started with the window, that might be because this one, it has a little bit higher contrast than the face does. That doesn't mean that you've looked at it wrong. That just means that the artist can affect different people in different ways. This week, we will be learning how to create our own value scale. We will make a step scale and a gradation to show a smooth transition between values. That video will be coming up soon. If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask me about it. You can send me a message on Canvas or you can ask me in class.